Season 2, Episode 10, Fabrício Carraro, Learner Profiles 1.
This is the Actual Fluency Podcast, helping you become a better language learner by providing motivating weekly inspiration, as well as top tips and tricks from expert guests. And now, your host, Chris Broholm.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Actual Fluency Podcast. To all old listeners, welcome back. It's good to have you back here listening to another episode. And to all new listeners, welcome to the podcast. This is a motivational and inspirational weekly language learning podcast designed to give you that little extra kick when you're trying to learn a language. And I'll feature interviews with prolific language learners, theoretical language learners, course makers, book writers, video makers, other podcasters, bloggers, and everything. And it's designed to sort of give you an input from every angle of language learning. So today I'm super excited about introducing a new concept to the podcast. This is called Learner Profiles. And basically what it is during the last 50 or 60 episodes, I've always wanted to talk to people about their language learning methods, habits, tools, techniques, software, any kind of tricks and tips about learning languages and how did they get into it in the first place and how did you get to 12, 20, 30 languages. And I have done that on a lot of episodes and I've tried to squeeze it in. But what I always found was that, let's say I had Benny Lewis on and I was talking about his book. Of course, his book does talk about language learning and it does have some parts of his story in it. But the thing is, if the episode was called, Fluent in 3 Months, the book, I couldn't really talk about general language learning, his story. But the idea was that if I had a separate episode, I could have learner profile Benny Lewis and then go into depth of just how he did it, how he used to learn, and how he learns today. And in that way, I avoid having these 3-hour episodes. And I'm sure some people would enjoy it, but for me, it's all about concentration. And I think ideally, 45 minutes is already pressing most people's concentrations. I want episodes that can give you a quick sort of motivational boost. I don't want them to be 3-hour rants. And I know, like I said, some people enjoy that. But anyway, so this is the first installment, and this is my friend Fabrcio from Brazil. And he has a hilarious story in this episode about how he got into, first of all, learning Russian in Brazil, which is a little bit unusual. And then how he found his wife, who is from Russia, and a lot of funny stories with you can imagine some of the angles that's going to be had there. But we talk about learning Russian, we talk about foreign cultures, and of course we talk about love, what can happen if you're learning a language, learning about a new culture, and you sort of embrace it. So it's a great episode. I really love it. So I hope you'll love it too. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, be sure to send it to me, chris@actualfluency.com. I love to read all your emails. I'm really sorry if I sometimes don't get back to you right away. I do get a few emails, and it's not an excuse, but sometimes, things just fly by me. So if you don't get a response within a week or so, don't be afraid to send me another email. Thank you. And just quickly before I open up the premiere episode of the Learner Profiles, just wanted to give a few quick announcements, admin stuff. And the first announcement is that June is Challenge Month. January this year was also Challenge Month, but June for me is a huge challenge month. I'll be doing Add One Challenge, and I'll be doing the italki June Challenge. And you can join me in those challenges if you want. I'm learning French. And if you are joining me, be sure to leave a comment in the show notes for this episode. And let me know. So you can join the Add One Challenge on actualfluency.com/add1c, just ADD1C. Or you can join the italki June Challenge by going to actualfluency.com/June Challenge. The second last announcement is that I'll be in Budapest in just about a week from when this episode originally aired. So that's in the end of May. And I'll be going to the Polyglot Workshop. So if you're going, be sure to say hi to me and say, hey, Chris, I know you from the podcast. And, so we can get to know each other. And, of course, I'm doing a little Actual Fluency meetup. So if you go to the Facebook page for Actual Fluency, just search for that. You can see events, and there's a little event group. So click going if you're in Budapest on the Friday before the workshop. That's the day before. We'll just go out for a nice casual drink and talk about languages or practice languages or do anything people really feel like doing. And all the information will be in that sort of event page. So if you click this going, you'll get all the updates. I don't know where it will be yet, but I'll I'll find out soon enough. And the last thing is, I just want to give a quick shout out to Duolingo. They just released their Norwegian and Ukrainian courses into beta. And normally I wouldn't do this, but a good friend of mine, Luke, has been a pivotal force on the Norwegian course. So I figured I owed him that as a big fan of the show to give him a little shout out for his hard work is finally paying off, and it's been released. So go and check out the Norwegian course if you want to learn Norwegian. Of course, as a Dane, I would always suggest you go learn Danish, but on the other hand, Norwegian is slightly easier for non-Scandinavian people to learn, so maybe that's a good starting point anyway. Ukrainian, of course, just coincidentally also released at the same time, but it's also a very interesting language, and as a Russian speaker, quote unquote, it's also interesting for me to see the similarities and differences in Ukrainian and Russian. It's almost like Norwegian and Danish, but perhaps a little bit more extreme. But anyway, so enough of me ranting, and here's the first episode, I would call it. It's not the first episode of the podcast, but it's the first episode of the learner profiles. And my idea was that every other week would be a learner profile episode, and then the other weeks in between would be a theme episode, so something like how to learn Chinese or Russian or whatever. And I hope you enjoy it, and as I said, if you have any feedback about the format or anything, chris@actualfluency.com, and I read all my emails. So thank you so much, and enjoy the Learner Profiles 1 with Fabrício Carraro. All right, Fabricio, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very fine. It's like a very, very sunny afternoon here in Italy, and the weather is great. I'm happy. Uh,
Fantastic. It sounds like the perfect life.
Yeah, it is.
But of course, a lot of people might not know who you are. So could you just give the people, a short introduction to how did you end up in Italy in May 2015?
Yeah, okay, sure. I guess most people don't know who I am, but I'm just a normal guy from Brazil. I'm actually a computer engineer working as a programmer. I'm 26 years old, married to a Russian girl, and I love languages. Right now I'm in Italy just because my family is Italian, and I want to get the Italian citizenship and the Italian passport to be able to come to Europe maybe in the future with her. And I don't know, I think it's much easier here in Europe if you want to travel, if you like traveling and learning languages as I do, because in Brazil is like a country itself. And if you're there, it's very expensive and very hard to get other people to talk to you if you're not online, I mean, like in person.
Mm-hmm.
And here you can just travel like anywhere here in Europe, so it's much easier. And it's an idea I have for my future.
Ah, fantastic. And of course, that idea about Europe is something. I mean, I'm European, and I know that a lot of Europeans don't really consider this when they go about their daily business. But the fact that the whole European Union is open for European citizens, and you don't have to worry about visas or any kind of bureaucratic nonsense. You can just travel around. It's really huge. And if you are sitting out there listening and are European, then be thankful for that, because people from like Brazil or the United States as well have a lot more hoops to jump through to to learn
Yeah.
languages. So, but that's really cool. And one story I definitely want to talk to you about is your wife. But before we get into that, I just wanted to get your opinion on. We were just at the Polyglot Gathering in Berlin recently,
Yes.
and just wanted to get your opinion. What did you think about the event, and did you see any cool talks?
Yes, I think it was the most fantastic experience, like in language learning since I began with it, because I already knew many of those people online through YouTube or Facebook or I don't know, Skype, but it was the first time to meet them in real life, like in person. In, you just see them, like they're made of meat and bones, you know. It's so strange, and at the same time, most people there, like maybe 99.9% of the people, they're so nice and so open-minded, and they are very like-minded. Like, these people that they like the same thing as you do, like languages and maybe other stuff, but mostly languages for the polyglot gathering. And for me, it was amazing. Like I went to maybe, I don't know, 10 talks or 15 talks, something like that. I really liked Richard Sincott's talk, Irina Pravet's talk, Ollie Richards' talk, but I cannot mention all of those because, like, for me, the most important thing was just getting together with them and with all those people, getting to know them, getting to talk to them over a beer or just over some freezing water that wasn't that sparkling anymore, you know?
Yeah, it's just a social aspect and
Yeah, yeah,
sort
that was
of.
like the greatest thing for me. And also the concert, the Yomo's concert.
Hmm.
It was like one of the most fun nights of my entire life. I'm not that geeky, if you if that sounded so, but it was like you're there with that many, many nice people that you just met for, I don't know, 3 days, and it feels like a lifetime, because they like the same things as you. They dance, they like to drink, and it was very, very fun for me.
Yeah, and also because you hang out for something like 16, 18 hours a day. So
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
definitely feel like when the gathering is over, you feel like you spend a lot of time getting to know people, and it's definitely fascinating. And I don't know if you felt the same way, but when I got home, I was like super excited. I was very motivated. And then a few days after, I had like the post gathering blues.
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so lonely.
Yeah, yeah,
Where
yeah.
is everyone? Why can't I go to the bar or the lobby or something and find polyglots to talk to?" And it really makes you appreciate it. But I'm really happy you had the same experience as I did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And for me, it was even worse because instead of going home to my parents and my wife, I just came to another country, to Italy, to be alone for 3 months. So it was even harder.
Right, I can see. And what sort of languages have you been working on in the last few years?
Ah, you mean since the
Too many to
beginning,
count.
or yeah? Yeah. No, like my last languages for I guess for the past year were German and Japanese, and a little work on my French and Russian because last December I went on a 30 days trip with my wife. It was like vacation, but we went to Russia to visit her parents. Then we went to Holland for a week. Then she went home, and I spent another week in Belgium and one more week in France. So I had to work a little bit on my Russian to go to Russia, my French to go to Belgium and France, and my Dutch to go to Holland.
Wow, that's so
But
crazy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was studied Japanese also for like 4 months, only the language. Then I quit it for because I wanted to study the characters, the kanji.
Hmm.
And I studied kanji for 5 months or so. So now I
Wow.
know like 600 kanji, which is not even half of them. But
No, but it's still a quite good job. I mean,
yeah, yeah, I'm still working on it.
so
Yeah.
it sounds a little bit like you're are you a dabbler? Do you get into a lot of languages, or do you find that you pick one and then you really isolate yourself
Yeah,
in
I'm
that?
actually not. That's the thing, because like from the beginning, my first, like, if you don't call it English, that you learn in school and like language schools, my first actual language was Italian, maybe in 2007, I guess.
Hmm.
I went to a course, like an intensive course for a month, and then I was studying computer engineer by then at university, and we have like this language institute, and you could just go there and have lessons. So I
Wow.
went for maybe, yeah, I had 1 year and almost 1 year and a half of Italian there, and it was great. Like I really, really improved my Italian by then, and also continued by learning, like watching movies, talking to people online, Skype, everything. And but it was only Italian. And then I started learning Russian, and it was only Russian. And then it was Dutch, I think, and only Dutch.
Oh, okay.
So I usually just pick one language and go for it for maybe 6 months or 1 year, 1 year and a half. It depends on the language. But since I don't know, since French, I guess, I'm starting to pick more languages one time because like I cannot not pick them from the beginning, but like I'm learning Japanese and I'm gonna continue learning, improving my French, not just leave it.
Yeah, you don't start completely new ones at the same time, but languages that you have some experience in, you can do more at the same time.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And what sort of methods do you use if you're sitting at home? What would be your, or actually, let me ask you this way, because I sometimes do this on the podcast. I ask people if they have to start a new language tomorrow,
Uh-huh.
say Icelandic or something, what would be your sort of ideal resources that you would look for, and how much would you study, or sort of how would your plan look in if you want to learn Icelandic?
Wow. Okay, so Icelandic. Usually, what I do right now, after maybe mm, 10 languages that I've like tried to learn, not that I speak them fluently, but like I've dabbled on them,
Hmm.
I started learning them and learned them for at least 6 months, I think. The first thing I try to do is checking if the language has an audio course like Michelle Thomas on it. Because like we were just talking, I hate Pimsleur because it's very, very slow for me. But I really, really like Michelle Thomas because it has like a nice pace, nice rhythm, and the sentences are usually useful. And the the best thing about it, I think, is just it gives you an insight of the grammar of the language without actually teaching you the grammar.
Hmm.
After I tried it for Japanese, I tried it for Dutch, and after like 20 hours of audio course after Michel Thomas, I could already see, like, clearly see in my mind the grammar of Japanese. Not for very complex sentences, of course, but for the basics in at least maybe A1, A2 level.
Hmm.
And that's my first step. I just check if the language has a Michel Thomas course or something similar. That's Paul Noble. They have it as well. Then I try to look for either SML because I really like SML or a grammar book. For example, for Russian, from the beginning, I just had a book called The New Penguin Russian Course
Hmm.
that I absolutely love. It's a lot of grammar. Like for those of you that don't like grammar too much, it's a lot of grammar. But I'm quite fond of it, so for me it was okay, and I like the rhythm of it as well. Like the lessons were structured. They were very, very well structured. So on lesson one you study, I don't know, greetings. Lesson two you go like very, very, not very fast, but not very slowly as well.
Hmm. Perfect.
Yeah, but the downside is that they don't have any audio. So that's why I try to balance it with Asimil or something like more focused on dialogues,
Hmm.
on the useful stuff. And then the grammar comes to get you like a bigger view of the language. But that's usually my first steps. First Michel Thomas, then Asimil plus grammar book.
Cool. That's a that's a top tip for getting into a language. Then I guess if you study those two or three resources very deliberately, then you could actually end up with quite a decent level in the language, depending on how close it is to your already known languages.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree completely. Like, for example, for French, I didn't do any Michel Thomas because I didn't know it by then. But I did the almost the whole SMU course, and after maybe 6 months, it was like 100 lessons, I guess.
Yeah.
I could already have like actual conversations only in French. Like I didn't know every word, but if I didn't know a word, I'd just go, how do you say that in French? But I could actually have conversations for like 30 minutes, 1 hour, and that was amazing for me because, oh, wow, after just doing this book, just as a meal,
It's just one book, yeah.
Yeah. But that was French. Like it's very close to my own language, Portuguese.
Okay, and of course it's very close to English as well, which you also know.
Yes,
So yeah,
exactly.
that French is a good language, and of course the advantage of learning French is that you have access to the entire SEML library because they start in French. It's a
Yeah.
French company, and all their publications start out as French books and are then translated into, I believe, English. And I have a German one here called Französisch ohne Mühe. So that's the cool thing. I don't speak French. Obviously, I'm learning French, but if I did speak French, I could order, uh, Portuguese, Portuguesian without pain or whatever.
Yeah. But you know that was my main reason to learn French
Really,
actually.
that's a true polyglot. There, I would say. Can learn all the other languages by just learning this one language.
Yeah.
It's nice. It's a nice language anyway, and it's
It
spoken
is.
quite
No,
a lot.
yeah. I really wanted to learn French, like in general, as a language, but I really wanted to learn other languages as well. And I knew that Assimil had like a
Right.
huge like amount of books in French. So I said, wow, now let's focus on French because it's gonna give me like access to many others.
Exactly, yeah. You can use your French and also strengthen your French, I guess. You
Yeah,
know,
sure.
it's not just learning language X, it's also strengthening what you already know from French.
Yeah, and
Um,
relating that to the conference, we had one night. It was like the book fair,
right.
and I actually bought one book that was based on in French for Indonesian.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm not gonna start with it right now, but in the future, I really like I told you, I really like SMU,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, I think I can use that for learning Indonesian.
Yeah, I picked up the Russian Essemil, the thick book with I guess it's about 100 lessons,
Yeah,
and I picked up the French book as well. But for the Russian one, for me, it is just filling out the blanks kind of thing.
it was the English-based one, or
Yes, yes, it was.
okay.
And it's interesting because obviously you normally start with SML and then move into the advanced one at some point. But I've just done a year of Russian and into this sort of, I don't know, maybe low B1 on a good day, a very low B1, tiny B1. So people were like, why do you buy the Russian SML? But I think that the way the sentences are structured in SML is a really good way to get, like you say, some kind of spoken level. But also, if you've been studying on your own, it's very easy to miss very elementary things. Like,
Yeah.
for instance, I haven't quite. Maybe if you put a gun to my head, I could say them, but I haven't quite learned the months and the days of the week yet. Just
Yeah.
because
I
I
know the
haven't really
feeling.
had a use for it. But I'm sure that a book like Asimil would have it in the first 50 pages or something, and they would use it quite regularly because it's important information, right?
Yeah, sure.
Before we move on with your story, I just wanted to take a quick moment to hear from our sponsor, Mellow Method.
Mellow Method is the learning revolution since 1995. Now you can make your dream of living your passion for languages real. Do you want a method that really teaches you a language? What if you could have your own school and get success teaching your students perfect lessons, 100% focused on conversation? Even if you have no experience, Mellow Method will work where other methods can't. With Mellow Method, you will overcome the speaking barrier from Lesson 1. Jimmy Mello, the Brazilian polyglot, has created the best method to teach any foreign language. It's now available in 11 languages from English to Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese, including Mandarin and Polish. Be a polyglot with Mellow Method. Access right now www.mellowmethod.com and reach your goals with Mellow Method, the best method ever created to teach and learn any language.
So great. And another topic I really want to talk to you about is, of course, your wife.
Uh,
Because when we were sitting at the dinner table at the Italian restaurant, and you told me, or maybe I saw it on your name card or something, so you spoke Russian quite well, actually, as well. And you know, people from Brazil don't generally learn Russian. Maybe at least that was my idea before going. But yeah, so you told me the story, and I just like to talk about it because I think it's a lot of people out there might be in a similar situation. So can you tell us, retell the story for the people. How did you get into Russian?
Okay, so like the first thing was I was in university, like I told you, and I was learning Italian, but I was almost done with it. Like I think the course was over, I guess. And I lived in a shared home with five other guys, and one of them liked languages as well. So he came with me to me with a book, like a Russian book. He said, "Hey man, I know that you like languages as well. So do you wanna learn with me? So we can just maybe like study 1 hour a day or something. I don't know, but it's gonna be more fun if we do it together." I said, "Yeah, okay, why not?" So he gave me the book, and I started learning the all the Cyrillic and like some basic sentences, basic words. But after some time, I created like a VKontakte account. For
Hmm.
those who don't know, it's like a Russian Facebook, and it's exactly like Facebook, but with more illegal stuff on it. But I would just create an account there and join some groups, some communities for like Brazilians learning Russians, things like that. But wasn't really focusing on it, but I was learning some things. And after, I don't know, some months I was there, I got a message, like a random day, I got a message from a girl, Russian girl. You say, "Hey, I saw that you're learning Russian, and I'm Russian. I'm learning Portuguese here in Russia, in Moscow. And do you want to practice? Because I'm going to Brazil in maybe 5 months. I already have a ticket, but my Brazilian Portuguese is not very good. So if you want to practice, we can do like a tandem or something." I say, "Yeah, why not?" Like I'm not very focusing on Russian right now because I don't have anyone to talk to, you know.
Hmm.
So I just started talking to her, and after 5 months, she came to Brazil. We it was amazing. Like we spent a very, very nice time together. And when she went back to Russia, I didn't want her to go back to Russia. She didn't want to go back, but she had to. So we had like an online. We stayed together this time in Brazil. We're kind of a couple already. And after she went back to Russia, we were like just talking every day, maybe 10 hours a day, or
Wow.
yeah, yeah. Some days it was actually 10 hours a day, maybe in the weekends. And we were really, really in love. So then after almost a year, I went to Russia and spent some time there as well, like met her family, her friends. And after some time, we decided to get married. And it was actually very lucky because she was looking for a way to come to Brazil, like legally, to be able to live here with me, like either studying or working, didn't matter. So uh, we went to Contacted. There was like this also the same Brazilian page that she found me. There was like a job announcement there. So
Really?
yeah, yeah, like oh, we need someone to work in São Paulo that speaks Russian but also speaks Portuguese.
Wow.
And yeah, yeah, it was for a Russian company. They had like the headquarters was in Moscow, but they have like a small office in São Paulo as well. So she applied and she got hired, and it
There
was
you go.
perfect. Yeah, yeah. So we got married in Moscow and moved to Brazil, and we've been living there for 5 years, so almost 5 years. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's a wonderful story. It's a little bit like a movie, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think it's a great story because it really shows what happens when you decide to look beyond your own culture or your own language, your own borders of your country. You know, something really fantastic can come out of it, and it might not be a life partner, but it could also just be a great friendship,
Yeah, yeah, sure.
or any kind of friendship really. But the thing is, if you don't expose yourself to that kind of culture, if you don't even want to get out of your own country or even listen about your own out of your own country, it's hard to get to those wonderful situations.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. If you travel a lot, or even if you don't travel, but you wanna travel, or you just wanna meet nice people, learning a language opens like so many doors. You can just talk to them in their own language, or even in English. Like if you don't, if English is the first foreign language that you're actually learning, even in English, you can talk to people overseas. Just
Hmm.
make friends. But it's all for me. It's always better if to talk to them in their languages.
Yeah,
But
I think so too. There's the Nelson Mandela quote that gets thrown out a lot these days, but if you speak to a man in the language he understands, it goes to his head. But if it's his own language, it goes to his heart. So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's
It's true.
it's so true, and particularly for I'm from Denmark and everyone speaks English, but
Mhm.
there's such a big difference if you speak Danish or English. Like you're just gonna socialize way better. People are gonna accept you much easier into their own lives, and there's just no discussion.
Yeah, and in Denmark, that's possible, like to just live there without speaking in Danish.
Yeah,
But in
definitely.
Brazil, you wouldn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No, you can live there, but it would be very, very hard, like to have Brazilian friends that actually speak like good Portuguese, because it's maybe the same thing as some European countries like Spain or Italy, that most young people or old, especially old people, don't speak any English.
Hmm.
And the young people, they speak some English, but some speak like very, very good English, but some don't speak it at all.
Yeah, it's very
So
interesting. Yeah, and I
yeah,
know that the English learning industry in Brazil is absolutely exploding, with
yeah, it's
people dying
huge.
to want to learn it. And I know it's the same for other countries. Like in Russia, I also know that English learning is absolutely, it's a huge industry, and I'm sure it's largely untapped to this point. But it's definitely interesting. About Russian,
Hmm.
how
Okay.
how did you find learning Russian?
Wow, for me, like it was my fourth language, maybe fifth if you count Spanish, but I only studied Spanish in school, so it doesn't really count. So like it was like Portuguese, Spanish, they were like the same language.
Hmm.
Then English and Italian, and then it was already Russian. So it was like my first language with cases, my first language, my first like, if you don't count English, my first like non-Latin language. So it was very, very crazy at first.
Right.
It
So how
was
did you overcome those difficulties? Was it because of your friend that you had that kind of mutual support, or did you not really do much with it until you met your future wife?
no, no, no. He gave up after I don't know 2 months.
Oh, okay. So he was not
Yeah, yeah,
persisting.
yes, but
Russian can do that to you, though. I sympathize with him, you know?
he can. And I would do, I think I would do the same if I hadn't met her, but for me at the beginning it was just like I was telling you, like I had this book and I was just starting learning it with this book and trying to get some words here and there, some sentences. And after I met her, like she was like a big motivation for me at first because I had someone to to ask questions, and to
Hmm.
talk to even. But we were mostly speaking in Portuguese from the beginning because she was the one coming to Brazil. I didn't have any plans to go to Russia in the near future. So it made more sense, And her Portuguese was already at a maybe A2 level, so and my Russian was like A0. I don't know. Yeah. It didn't make any sense for me to have a conversation in Russian, an actual conversation.
Right.
But after this, I started having lessons, like having Russian lessons in the same institute at my university,
Uh-huh.
that the one that I had Italian. I went there for a Russian lesson as well, and I took maybe 3 semesters there, and it was amazing because the teacher was very nice, but it was like was in between my marriage. So my first step was just going through this book, and with my wife for maybe when I knew I was going to Russia, it was maybe, I don't know, 6 months of intensive learning. Every single day I would do something, maybe got to the book. If I didn't feel like it, I just watch a movie, listen to some songs, talk to her, ask her questions. I had like a small notebook that I was like, today you're gonna have a lesson about kitchen. So how is refrigerator in Russia? Yeah. I didn't want to go like just Google this stuff. I wanted to go to do something more lively.
Right.
And with her it was more fun as well. So like today it's about kitchen, how's refrigerator, how it's oven, and how is I want to bake a pie. Some like basic sentences related to kitchen,
Right.
you know. So that was my beginning, and it was very, very painful, especially because of the cases.
Yeah, they're evil.
Yeah, yeah. At first, I didn't know like what's that. What does that even mean? Like, why did I have to learn those cases, and why do they make it so hard? You know?
Right. It does
But
seem a little extreme at times
yeah, yeah,
in Russian.
yeah. And after like 6 months of studying by myself, I went to this institute at my university, and I asked the teacher because, oh, I already know some Russian, so can I get to like the second level, like not the first one because it's gonna be very basic for me. He said, okay, sure, you can come. So I went straight to the second level, like the second class, kind of, and worked with them for 6 months. But I noticed that I already knew more than them as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because like I was studying a lot in my first 6 months with my wife. Mm, they were just like maybe it was twice a week, like 2 hours twice a week. So it wasn't a lot.
No.
Yeah, and I had a partner. Most of them didn't have anyone, so they would just go to the lesson and just go home and do other things, other subjects as well because they were in university after all. And when I went to Russia, like my first time, I really, really had to struggle to communicate with her parents because they only spoke Russian.
Right.
Yeah, and it was after maybe 1 year that I was really, really learning it. So it was hard, very hard, but we could speak. You know, I spoke very, very basic Russian, I guess. I guess maybe A2 plus, not even a B1, I guess. Maybe something more than an A2, I guess. But we could have like a nice conversations for more than an hour,
Right.
speaking about any if I didn't understand something, I had a translator right over there, so it was fun.
That helps.
Yeah, yeah. But I guess the most fun story was when I wanted to propose to my wife, but like we already knew that we were getting married, but her parents already knew it. But I wanted to like make an official thing, to them, like ask, oh, can I get married to your wife and blah blah blah. And I told my wife, oh, okay, I'm gonna speak in Portuguese and you can translate it. And she said, no, I'm not gonna propose myself to my parents. So I had to like propose to her parents in Russian, and it went quite well actually. Like I didn't have to ask for any words. It went like very very slowly and with many mistakes probably, but I could get my points.
That's great.
Uh, and
So why did
also
you, sorry? Go ahead.
and also like when you want to actually get married at the city council, or I don't know how you call it, like a city hall or something.
Sure,
You
yeah.
go to get married. Yeah, you were there, and there was the it wasn't a priest, but kind of a judge that was marrying us, and she was talking like really really fast in this very archaic form of Russian, like very official, and I didn't know a single word, like actually a single word of what she was saying. I was just like staying there, like holding my wife's hand and looking at her, like with a suit, my wife with her dress, and suddenly she stopped talking. So I said, "What the fuck? Well, what should I do something now?" And my wife told me in Portuguese, "Say yes, say yes," and I just went like "da," and she went "da," and then it went on. So that was my only line in my wedding.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
I can understand how that must have been
yeah, yeah.
interesting.
It was, but like telling now is fun, but at the moment it was very, very upsetting.
I can imagine. How have you built it up now? What level are you at now, and what sort of got you there?
I guess I'm a B2 probably. I'm trying to get to C1, but it's hard because I don't know if I told you, but my wife doesn't speak to me in Russian at all. she doesn't like to. She has no patience, and that I had an accent, and it's strange to talk to me in Russian because we only speak in Portuguese. We always speak in Portuguese.
Mm.
So it's not her husband. It's just some random man trying to speak to her in Russian. So,
I can see. Yeah,
yeah,
you have to get a tutor then
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
an italki and get someone to.
That's what I do.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's great. That's great.
I try to do like I actually just had an italki lesson maybe 2 hours ago in
Oh,
Russian.
cool. So, what would you say were the defining sort of? What do you know now? I know that the levels. If you called yourself high A2 before and you're about a B2 now, I know the difference on paper. But
Uh-huh.
what do you feel are the biggest differences from back then to now?
Well, I think that right now I can speak much more fluidly. Like I can have a conversation without many ums and ums, you know. That's one thing that's very important for the flow of the conversation. Of otherwise the other person gets bored after maybe 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And also the cases, now I get them right more often. Maybe not always, but more often
Hmm.
for sure. And the aspects as well, like the verb aspects. I know my vocabulary is much higher right now, like much bigger. And what I do, what I did to get to it was a lot of italki lessons, a lot of Anki decks. I
Right.
have my own Anki decks, so I try to study it after maybe every day or every other day. And I don't know, I try to speak to my in-laws, but that's not very often. We talk maybe once a month or so.
Hmm.
So, but that's the only, I don't get any Russian with my wife. I just get Russian with my in-laws
Right. Yeah,
and my
well, I
tutors, of
understand.
course.
I can totally understand because at the end of the day, I mean, it's your wife, it's not your language tutor, and
Yeah,
of course you would love a little bit of support once in a while, but
yeah,
I can
sure.
definitely understand where she's coming from, and I always tell people, and they shouldn't assume that anyone is their language teacher, partner, or friend, or even somebody working in a cafe. If they
Mhm.
want to go to straight to business and use a language that's fastest and convenient, then that just respect that. I think is a good starting point. But at least you got some motivation out of it because
Yeah,
once you do get to C2 or whatever, I guess you'll have no problems.
yeah, sure.
Well,
But I also,
yeah.
one thing that I also like is that right now I can watch like Russian media, like Russian movies or even music, but mostly movies without worrying too much about the subtitles.
Hmm.
Like I have to use subtitles, otherwise I won't get everything. But I have almost the same thing as I have in maybe English or Italian that I have the subtitles sometimes, but it's I do most of the listening and
Hmm.
I don't need to really use them. They're uh, they're just there, you
Back
know.
up in
Yeah, they're back up
case you don't
if
understand.
I need them. Yeah.
Right, that's really cool, and I think that's a good. I mean, that's sort of where I'm aiming for with my Russian, because it's a very stress-free level to be at. You can have most conversations, and you can put on a movie and understand what's going on. You might not understand every word, but definitely understand what's going on, right? So,
Uh-huh. But do you use italki as well?
yeah. I mean, that's almost all I'm doing.
Okay.
Every week I have a lesson because I think that first of all, I'm focusing a lot on conversation. So for that to practice that, I'd need a conversation. But
Yeah,
also
sure.
because I'm quite lazy, so if I book an hour, I know I'm going to do it an hour. But having to do reading or desk time or even vocabulary is quite hard. I find because I've been,
Yeah,
on
it is.
Memrise, you can you have to water after a certain period of time, and I have like 1,500 words or something that I need to
Wow.
review. Yeah, it's really. Whew. So I haven't actually done much vocab in the last months or so, but my plan is to once I get a little bit more time. I'm really busy now with moving and everything, but once I get a little bit more time, I'd like to sit down and watch a TV show or a movie or something, and just try to transcribe what the people are saying to each other.
Yeah, that's a great
And
thing.
then if there's a word that I'm missing, try to spell it, and then add it to an Anki deck or a memorized deck,
Hmm.
and just do those words, because then I'll be doing words that I definitely didn't know before, and
Hmm.
I definitely could have used. Whereas,
Yeah.
if you do like 10,000 most frequent words, first of all, you might know the first few thousand already, so there's no need to do it in memorize.
Uh-huh.
And second of all, who do you need the word for alligator or blowfish? I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
Even just because it's frequent doesn't mean it relates that much to what you're doing. So for me, the italki lessons definitely keep things together, and also motivates me, because I know that if I'm the same level every week, then the conversations are not going to develop that much. But if I put in just a little bit of extra work outside the lessons, I can feel it in the next session. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah, sure. That's true. And that's one of the points that I usually criticize SML for. That's they use some very, very useless words. Like I was doing actually SML Russian just to like try to review some things and maybe learn some new sentences or some expressions.
Hmm.
And they have the word catafalque there, which is hers.
Right. Yeah.
Why would I need that? I don't even know this in Portuguese.
Right. Exactly. That's my favorite. When there's a word that you don't even know in your own native language that you're
Yeah.
trying to learn. I mean, that's the funniest thing ever. But anyway, Fabricio, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. But I can see the time has been flying, as per
Yeah.
usual when you're having fun. But I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. It was very, very nice to talk to you.
Awesome. And I'll see you somewhere in Europe, maybe,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
in
I'm in Europe.
yeah, you're in Europe for the next 3 months. So you won't be in Brazil when I'm going there in August then.
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately.
Oh, but you might. Are you going to New York? Have you decided?
No, probably not because it's very expensive and I'll be back to Brazil. My wife won't like it.
All right. You've been
After
traveling
three
enough.
months apart, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I can understand that. All right. Well, I'll hope to see you sometimes in Europe. I'll definitely be around. So see you then.
Okay, great, man. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you for listening to the Actual Fluency Podcast. If you would like to get more out of the podcast, check out the VIP Club by going to actualfluency.com/VIP.